The email had been sitting there for 3 days. Lucas knew exactly which one it was. The subject line was still there, glowing in his inbox like a small accusation. He had opened it once, maybe twice, then closed it again before his mind could commit to a response. Nothing was wrong with the message itself. That was the problem. It wasn't a crisis. It wasn't offensive. It was just important enough to matter and simple enough to expose him if he said the wrong thing. So he did what smart men often do when they're afraid of being wrong. He thought. He paced the apartment with his phone in his hand, staring out the window, rehearsing versions of a reply that all sounded either too cold, too eager, too vague, or too direct. He opened the Notes app, deleted a sentence, typed another, deleted that too. In his head, every possible outcome became a threat. If he answered too quickly, he might look desperate. If he waited too long, he might miss the opportunity. If he chose the wrong tone, he might damage something valuable. And while he stood there trying to protect every possible future, the present kept moving without him. This is the trap. Not laziness, not stupidity, something more subtle and far more dangerous. The illusion that endless thinking is the same as being responsible. For a lot of men, that's where the mind becomes a cage. You tell yourself you're being careful, mature, strategic. But if you're honest, sometimes fear just puts on a suit and calls itself logic. Lucas looked at the screen again and muttered, "Come on, man, just send something." That was the strange part. He wasn't incapable. He had handled bigger things than this. He could solve problems at work, keep a level head when everyone else panicked, and make decisions under pressure when it mattered for someone else. But when the choice belonged to him, when the possibility of embarrassment or failure touched his own name, the mental noise got louder. Suddenly the stakes felt massive. Suddenly movement felt dangerous. And maybe you know that feeling too. That moment when a simple decision turns into a private war. You keep waiting to feel ready, but readiness never arrives. You keep searching for the perfect answer, but perfection only creates more delay. Meanwhile, life does what it always does. It keeps going. If you've ever stared at a message, a decision, or an opportunity and felt yourself freeze, take a second and like this video, because you are not alone in that pattern. But the real question is this: how many chances have already passed while you were trying to think your way into certainty? Because the solution doesn't begin with thinking more. It begins with seeing clearly. And once you can see the difference between what you control and what you don't, everything starts to change. Lucas stared at the screen, his cursor blinking like a warning light. The email was simple enough. 2 sentences, maybe 3. Yet in his mind, it had become a battlefield. What if he sounded weak? What if he said too much? What if he said too little and lost the opportunity? The more he tried to think his way into the perfect response, the more the moment slipped through his hands. That was the trap. Not laziness, not lack of talent, just a mind that kept demanding certainty before movement. And certainty in real life almost never arrives first. He leaned back in his chair and remembered the harsh truth he had been ignoring. Some things were his to command, and some things were not. He could control the clarity of his message. He could control the tone, the effort, the timing. He could not control how the other person would feel or whether they would approve or whether the outcome would be ideal. The peace came not from knowing everything, but from finally separating responsibility from fantasy. That shift changed the air in the room. The pressure didn't vanish, but it stopped owning him. He inhaled slowly, placed his hands back on the keyboard, and asked a simpler question. What is the next right action? Not the perfect one. Not the one that would guarantee victory. Just the next one that moves the chain forward. One sentence. Then another. A draft appeared where there had only been dread. And this is where men often reclaim their power, not by becoming emotionless, but by refusing to kneel before hesitation disguised as intelligence. Overthinking loves to wear a suit. It sounds responsible, careful, strategic, but too often it is just fear protecting itself with fancy words. Meanwhile, life does not wait for your mind to feel ready. The job interview happens. The relationship changes. The chance disappears. The longer you stand still, the more expensive indecision becomes. If this hits close to home, take a second and like the video. Not for the algorithm, though it helps, but as a small signal to yourself that you are done confusing thought with action. Because here's the question that matters. How many opportunities have you already lost while waiting to feel certain? How many conversations never happened because you were still rehearsing them in your head? And if you knew the answer would never be perfect, would you finally move? Lucas hit send. The room didn't explode. The world didn't end. No dramatic music. Just a quiet click, followed by something far more valuable than relief. Momentum. And once momentum begins, the next decision gets lighter. The next risk gets smaller. The next move starts to feel possible. That's where the real break happens. Not when fear disappears, but when action begins before fear gets the final word. And in a moment, there's one tool that can help you do exactly that, especially when your mind tries to negotiate its way back into paralysis. And that's the real turning point. Not when the perfect answer arrives, but when he finally understands that clarity is often born from movement, not from endless thought. Lucas sits there for a moment, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the city outside his window. The same screen that once felt like a battlefield now looks smaller, almost harmless. The email is still there. The decision is still there. But the fear around them has changed shape. It no longer feels like truth. Feels like noise. He exhales, places both feet on the floor, and does the next right thing. Not the perfect thing. Not the cleverest thing. Just the next one. That is the discipline Stoicism asks of a man. To stop negotiating with fear and start answering to his values. Because life does not reward the man who thinks the most. It rewards the man who can act while still carrying uncertainty on his shoulders. Maybe that's where you are right now too. Maybe your mind has been convincing you that delay is wisdom, when in reality it's just fear wearing a polished suit. If so, take this as your reminder. You do not need to control every outcome to make a strong move. You only need to control your effort, your attention, and your willingness to begin. One honest message. One difficult conversation. One decision made without asking the same question 20 times. And if this hit home for you, give the video a like so it can reach more men who are tired of living stuck in their own heads. Then tell me in the comments, what's the one thing you've been overthinking instead of doing? I read those answers and they often become the next story we break down together. If you want more practical, stoic ways to build discipline, confidence, and mental clarity, subscribe now. Because the next lesson may be exactly what you need to finally stop circling the same thoughts and start moving forward for real.